Have you ever wanted to learn how to service your Penn International 30 yourself? Well, let's go. What is up, guys and gals? Today we're going to share how to break down, service, and reassemble your Penn International 30 with some tips and tricks along the way. Now, before we get started, we're going to go ahead and look for a schematic for this, just so we see the breakdown or the burst diagram of this, plus the part numbers if we need to order anything on it. Now, to simplify the breakdown and service of this reel, we'll do it in 3 sections. We're going to do the left side, the spool, and then the right side. So to start with the left side, we're going to remove those screws on the outside and then open it up. Now we'll see for this screw here, we have a little bit of difficulty undoing it. It does back up on me, but it feels very tight. So I'm going to go ahead and take some oil, just spray it on there. Just kind of want to have that work down through it. And just so you know, most of the items that I use to service this reel will be listed in the description below. So check there if you want links to them. Now we'll let that soak for a little bit. Then I'm just going to work my screwdriver back and forth to kind of get that down there. I'm going to continue adding oil to this. I'll stick some over here, just kind of get inside those little crevices, but I'll also add some more here. And I had one more that was a little tricky, which was this one, I believe. So we're going to stick some there as well. One thing to note here, these screws on the bottom will be shorter than the other post screws. So just take that note or make that note. There you go, with that little rust or corrosion on the bottom there. That was the one that was giving me some difficulty. So now to get back to this top one, we're just going to kind of work that in like we were doing before, just back and forth. One thing you do want to note is you don't want to just back it up all the way. You want to kind of get in there, tighten it back down, and then unscrew it. And sometimes even when you do this, you'll snap that screw off. It's just one of those things that happens. But there's ways to get that out. So I'm just going to work on this like so. Keep adding my oil, and I'll come back to you guys when it's removed. Now this is almost out of there. And in theory, we should see some of that corrosion like we did for one of those bottom screws there. But we may not because I put oil on this. But let's see. Yeah, I can feel there's still a resistance right here. Let me pull this off. And there's resistance inside that plate. And that's what we're having an issue with. And that's not atypical for these reels, because that's where the corrosion really starts and ends up. Rarely is it inside the post, it's usually inside this frame. That's good. And there we go. Now to pull this out, I have a tool that is no longer available, but it's a very handy tool to use to get these bearings out, especially when they're kind of stuck. So that will not be listed in the description below. Now we're going to do those 2 screws there to get these springs off. Then to clean this up, we're just going to kind of wipe things down inside, but I will also spray some oil inside here, as well as use a pipe cleaner to clean out those holes. I'm going to go ahead and spray inside here with some oil like that. Let that sit for a little bit. I'm going to test this bearing out. I did test a reel before opening this up, and it all felt good with some minor issues. All the bearings did feel good, just verifying that this one is. Because sometimes when you test these reels out, they can all feel good in terms of the bearings, but sometimes you'll have one that's locked up, but the centrifugal force of the spool will keep it moving forward, giving you the false impression that it's still good. So let's go ahead and wipe that out. We're just going to use a paper towel, just kind of wipe inside there. That should get most of it out. If we need to do anything else, we can use a toothbrush, Q-tips, maybe even a wire brush. The wire brush you have to be a little bit careful with, because you don't want to dig too deep into this thing, because you don't want to remove that gold plating on there. but you should be fine overall. So I'll show you what to do with the wire brush. See those little pieces right there? Just gently go around it like that. And it loosens everything up. When you do that, you can actually go back inside there with some oil. Help break down that dried up grease inside there. Then either use your toothbrush or a paper towel to get that out. That all looks pretty good. Let's just wipe it and see what happens. And for the most part, we have most of this out. So we should be good. Just get my toothbrush, kind of get into those nooks and crannies right there. And that looks good. Now we'll do the same for these other pieces. Before I do that, I'll show you what I do in terms of clearing out these holes. Like I said, I take a wire brush and just kind of get the gunk out. You see all that stuff coming out of there. You want to have that hole pretty clean because, again, that's where the screw is going through, and that's usually where you'll have the corrosion build up and lock the screw in. So I'm going to end up doing that for pretty much all of these, just to make sure that they're clean. All right, now we've cleaned everything up. We're going to go ahead and put everything back together. You can see that I've greased that bearing. And again, you can check in the video description for links to things that I use. I'm going to grease inside here. I will not grease the plate or the inside of that side plate, but I will add just a light amount of grease around there. I will also add some oil, and that's because I don't want those dogs sticking on me. We can certainly grease these lightly. That just helps protect them. We're going to go ahead and take one of our screws here, stick that inside the hole like that, and then we're just going to lay it over it like so, and then screw it in. A little easier to do it this way than to try it by putting it down and then trying to screw it in. We're going to lock that down with this, but then we're also going to tighten it with the larger screwdriver. Same for the other side. Now we do snug these down, but we don't over tighten them. But you want to lock them in place. And the key here is that you want this on the inside. You want that spring on the inside of that silver piece right there. And we have that for both. Now we can certainly take our dogs and stick them on there. They just go on like so. When we put them on, we're going to test them to make sure they flick up in the air. Most of the time they do. If they do not, then go ahead and flip it over and see if it does it better that way. And notice I didn't grease these dogs. You can if you want to. It is not necessary, but I do it sometimes. I'm working some of that grease that I pushed into this bearing out. And you don't really have to do this part. If you get the grease inside there, it will eventually come out when you use the reel. Okay, now we'll get to the spool. You'll notice in here that we have quite a bit of corrosion happening. We're going to use our product to get that kind of cleaned up a little bit. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. But let's go ahead and work on breaking this down. I'm going to pull this shaft out, and we're going to have 4 washers there. Let's go ahead and do this side first. We're just going to undo those 4 screws on the outside. And this is one step you don't have to do if you don't want to. I'm doing an entire breakdown of this reel just so you see pretty much where everything is. And I like to, if I've never done a reel before, meaning someone else may have serviced it but I didn't, then I like to check to make sure certain protections are in place. And this is one of those areas where you want to have some protection under here. And by that I mean just some greasing around there, because you see a lot of little things kind of get built up under here, and that can start to corrode away. Put a little wipe down on it right there. But we're going to pull this bearing out of there. That was easy. We'll check them in a sec. And now to open this up, this is the older style drag cover. So we're going to have to stick a screwdriver in there. But what I'm looking for, which I will not be able to show you on camera, I don't think, is a little gap. There's 4 little tabs that we have to look out for. And I think there's one right there. So we're going to take our screwdriver, stick that in, push. It flipped up on me, excuse me. Push it in, and essentially one of those pops up, and then you can work the other ones around to pull them out. This one just kind of shot up in the air, so that's what it looks like. Now we can take those 4 screws and remove them. Essentially the reason is the same as doing the click plate. We want to make sure that we protect underneath here, because water kind of sits in there and starts to eat away at it. Bearing out, doesn't matter what side they're on. And we could separate this as well, which I think we will, just to show it to you. This is a newer style drag washer. It is the HT100 drag washer. In general, these older style internationals come with a donut that's made out of asbestos, but you can upgrade them to this kind of drag washer. If you notice, I'm keeping all these screws just kind of in one pile. That's because they're all the same. And again, separating the two. All right, same process as the left side plate to clean up. This will be a little different. I will show you what I do here. I take some brake cleaner fluid and spray that out just to kind of clean out any crud like over here that we see kind of built up. We want to make that as gritty or rough as possible, so they can engage the drag properly. Now when I do spray this down, I let that soak for a little bit, and then I clean it off with paper towel, toothbrush, whatever it takes to kind of get that out without damaging the washer itself or the drag. All right, so now if you look at the spool, you'll see obviously the gold plating off, but the majority of that corrosion has gone away. So we're going to add some corrosion inhibitor in a second. But before I do that, we're going to go ahead and add some drag grease to this washer. This is not required, but it does help the drag washer last longer. One thing you want to note with this is that if you put it on there, the drag does tend to have less top end drag, but you're dealing with a good amount of drag on these reels anyhow, so you don't really need as much drag as it can put out, especially when you put these new washers in there. I'm just going to wipe off the excess. Your goal is to get that drag grease into the grooves on the drag washer, which we just did, and you saw me put some grease on the back here as well. So let's go ahead and spray this down and wipe some corrosion inhibitor in there. I'll do it over here. We'll do it for both sides. And all I'm going to do here is just wipe this in with my finger and leave it there. At the end we'll wipe this stuff off, but we kind of want it to soak into those exposed areas. Now we'll go ahead and add some grease to certain places here. One is inside here where the bearings go. On the outside where that click plate will go. Same thing for the other side. And you can use your fingers to just kind of rub that in to get it uniform. One thing I do want to show you guys, and you probably won't be able to see this on camera, but on the drag side where this cover goes, if you stick your fingernail in there and lift up, you'll feel a little groove. And that's where these tabs, and there's 3 tabs, not 4, these 3 tabs will be sitting. Last thing we'll grease here would be this plate. This is where the drag washer sits. And we can also grease the back side of it where that dog will be riding, inside right there like that. The more you put, the less the dog sounds. The less you put, the more you can hear the dog. What I can tell you that is, in general, you can put as much as you want on here. It will not stop the stop the dog from working. Unless you have some rounded off ratchets or knobs right there, then you should be fine. Since we're here, we're going to go ahead and grease the back side of these plates as well. And then we'll jump to adding some oil to the bearings. Now you can see on this drag side or drag side of the reel, I added a different grease. One was the drag grease and one was the Penn grease. It doesn't really matter for that. As long as you're protecting it is what's most important. It won't counteract or interact with it to cause any issues. Now we'll take these bearings and we'll add some oil to them. We'll go ahead and work that in. Help it get down in there. And for conventional reels, for the most part, I oil the spool bearings, but the outside bearings, like the left side bearing and the pinion bearing, I will grease. All right, that's good. Now we get to the clutch washers, and we'll see that these things are concave, so they kind of curve in. You're gonna have one curved inside facing the other curved inside, so if you put them together, you'll see a little gap in the middle right there. You want that spacing, that's how it's supposed to sit. So we'll have two concave to concave or convex to convex clutch washers sitting on top of one another looking like that. I'm going to add some grease to these also. And as you can see, I'm fairly liberal with this one. These have a tendency to start rusting up on you, so we want to kind of protect them as best we can. And lastly, we have the pinion gear. Some grease around that teeth right there. That should be good. You can grease this as well if you want. You don't really have to, but you do grease down here where these splines are. All right, now we'll start putting the clutch washers together just to stick them onto the pinion gear here. That's way there, it's out of the way. And then we'll work on putting the click gear on, which is this. We don't need to put the bearing in yet. You can if you want to. Just going to sit that there and then screw them in with the screws. These are going to make snug, but we're not going to over tighten these because you can snap these off. So now we're all the way at the bottom. We're going to go ahead and just do one extra snug with the larger screwdriver. And then let's go ahead and wipe this stuff off. In a sec, when we get back to here, we'll do this side first, then we get back to here, we're going to add some grease around there. But for now, we're going to go ahead and jump to this side. Now that we've secured that, we're going to go ahead and wipe that plate off. Make sure it's pretty clean. And now we're going to take the drag washer, secure it to this, and I'll come back to you after that's done. Okay, so when it comes to reinstalling the drag washer, there's a couple ways you can do it so you can get this cover on. One way is you can take this pinion bearing, stick that through there like so. Make sure it goes through both of the bearings. Take the spring, drop that on, and then position this kind of over it. You can feel when it kind of locks in place, and then it's already set. Now we can take this cover. I may have to stand up before this, but we put over that drive plate, And now I'm going to stand up and just push down on this. Now notice there's the tabs I was referring to before, 1, 2, and 3 on one side. I'm going to take one, kind of position it under the plate, push down with my fingers, and then push the other ones in. Now we have 2 in, we have this last one that's open, or still out. I'm going to take my screwdriver, just push in, and then let it go down. And I'll hold it just in case none of them are set in position. But now we can see that they are. Now, one way to test if this is installed properly is you can take it and turn it. If you can turn it and it doesn't pop out, then you're good. The other way you can reinstall the drag washer is to remove that pinion gear. And the reason you do that is because then you have the full width of that click plate as leverage when you push down on this cover. So we'll take it like this, drop the spring on there, balance this drag washer on there like so, then just take it, same kind of process, and we're going to push down, get one tab in first, work on getting the other one in, then I'm going to hold it like this, and the same concept of pushing it in and popping it down. That looks like it's set. Let's make sure. We'll take it and we'll spin it, and we can see this is set. Now the spring obviously could be out of place, so we just take our screwdriver, just kind of reposition that. That looks like it should be good, but we're going to test it out and make sure that's fine by sticking the pinion gear through. It has to go all the way through for it to be set, which we already know, and that is not there yet. So we pull it back out and we work on repositioning that spring. You can use the pinion gear to help reposition the spring as well. Just kind of push it, it kind of forces the way through, and then just sets that spring in the proper place, and we can see that set again. Now of course, whenever you're done with either method that you use, you want to go over here and add some grease, just a light amount, to those holes on the click plate. You can also come ahead and double check, or come over here and double check to make sure you have enough grease in this drive plate. And that looks pretty good. That falls out, that's fine. You can stick that back in.